I don't have full recall of what happened when I was under hypnosis. I remember a lot of it, but not all of it.
I was under obedience to do what I was told. By then, the abuse had started.
I didn't want to have sex with him, or didn't want him to have sex with me, or use me for sex anymore.
They made him have sex with a dog. They cut one of his testicles out and made him eat it. They took his teeth out with a hammer and chisel.
Techniques of mind control are so effective. A lot of people think, oh, if we could just get him or her out of the group, that would be it. It's not as easy as that. Cults are very, very active in the UK. They're damaging individuals, they're damaging families, they're damaging the economy. There are up to 1,000 different cults in operation, and I'm known for being conservative with my figures.
I think everyone who manages to escape a cult and build any sort of semblance of a normal life is truly a survivor. The Children of God were formed in 1968 by a former evangelical pastor called David Berg. My parents both joined the cult as teenagers in France. They were both around 17 when they joined. This was in the first decade of the cult's existence, when the cult appeared to be quite an exciting place to be. They married within the cult and began having children. Not long after, they were sent to Thailand, where I was born. The Children of God believed that all Christians should abandon all their personal belongings and families and live fully for Christ. They became quite a large movement. So in total, I believe they had about 30,000 people pass through the cult over the decades that they were the most active. At any one time, there were about 10,000 members, of which about 60% were children because they didn't believe in contraception.
There is hidden population, though less hidden now because some of these young people are coming out talking about their experience, of people who were born or grew up in cults. It's easy for people to say, well, you know, why did you join this group? You're so stupid or needy or weak or vulnerable or whatever it is. You can't say that about the people who are born or brought up in these groups and who've really suffered terribly.
For the majority of my childhood, we lived in combo homes, very large homes, and it was run very much like a military camp. We were divided up by age groups, we had very strict schedules, we all slept together, ate together, and basically they were raising us to be members of God's final army.
Religious fanaticism or cultish behavior warps the ideology, and it makes it try to perceive to the victim, in effect, that what they're doing is actually correct, what they're doing is right, even though it's a hyper-literal interpretation of the faith.
So not only were we being trained, spiritually and physically to become soldiers, we were told that we would die as martyrs and receive, amazing gifts when we got to heaven for our sacrifice. We were told that we would have superpowers, like being able to shoot thunderbolts from our eyes. They also predicted the end of the world several times, which meant that we children were brought up with the firm knowledge that we were going to die most likely in our teenage years.
You have this total belief system or total ideology where you can only believe the cult beliefs, nothing else. This is all you need to know, it covers everything. So, forget all the other things that you might be interested in. And we can explain everything that ever happened in the world and ever will happen in the world.
If they can play to some of their fears and tell them that, well, actually, the world itself is coming to an end as well, they portray this, in effect, a doomsday type scenario, which makes those individuals fearful for their own lives.
I can't say I remember many moments where I was happy. I think the fact that we were not allowed to see our parents as much as most children would, or even our own siblings, meant that, you just felt very alone, often, no matter how many people were surrounding you. We had a lot of time being brainwashed with Berg's doctrines. No matter what kind of relationship you were in, everyone was encouraged to sleep with everyone else who was in their commune, to the point that they actually had sexual sharing schedules. So people didn't even have the option of who they wanted to sleep with. They were told who, when, and how.
Cults do not allow free choice. Other organizations, the churches, your local social group allows free choice to become a member or not. What you see is what you get in a legitimate organization. That's not what you get in a cult.
Things escalated when David Berg brought out the law of love. He brought out several letters about child sex, in which he claimed that it was acceptable for children to experiment sexually and be sexually active by the time they hit puberty, which for some girls and boys would be about the age of 12 or 13. This, unfortunately, caused quite a wave of child sex abuse in the cult, where every person who was inclined that way took his doctrines as the go-ahead to abuse children. And unfortunately, I was one of them. At the age of 4, I was abused on multiple occasions by an adult man who lived in our home and who looked after us children.
The children of God have been known for the abuse of people from very early days. And what's happened to people in that organisation is quite tragic.
It was in my second year at art school. I had come out of a marriage. Emotionally, I was lost. I was just really interested in broadening my horizon. I saw posters for Native American shaman. I thought that would be interesting to go and check out this guy, imagining it'd be a wizened old man with a white beard. And this person who arrived on the platform was a young, easygoing American guy, like a chap next door, who just happened to have a very big gift in healing, as he said. He had whopping great eyes, and he was issuing out love, it seemed, from those eyes. He looked at me and said, you're the one. You can help me. You're strong. You can really help me. And it was like, okay, that's me. At last, I know where I belong.
People assume that there has to be something wrong with you to finish up in a cult. Simply not true. If you're a caring, loving person who wants to either better themselves or make life better for others, then you're an easy target.
So a lot of these individuals, if they are having personal problems in their family, if they suddenly meet somebody who's offering them a solution to many of the questions that they have, then you are giving them what they're looking for, what society can't give them. And I think that's one of the most powerful things about cults.
Somebody had given over her house to him in London, turned it into sort of a temple kind of thing. This was over months, but clearly it was, say, this group was getting tighter.
If you can control other people, you can get some fringe benefits. You can get sex, you can get money, you can get free labor, you can get adulation. But I think the fundamental motivation is to control others, to control kind of your environment.
It was like my outer life was diminishing, and the life within was getting stronger. As it went on, he then dropped his Christian name and started using a Tibetan name, because he started claiming that he was the proper Buddha. And the Dalai Lama wasn't the real Dalai Lama, but in fact he was. And he was also not only the Dalai Lama, but he was also Jesus reincarnated. And I totally took it on board. I thought, yep, I know that's real. I know that's right. And he said, yeah, the people who have formed themselves around me, and I was one of them, are the disciples reincarnated. And I thought, I haven't got a problem with that.
I would argue that the average cult member, although he or she isn't aware of it, is no longer critically able. They're no longer able to critically evaluate. It's as though they can just switch off logic in the person's mind. And so when cult members say peculiar things, when they do peculiar things that don't seem to make sense to the rest of us, it makes perfect sense to them because they're doing what they're programmed psychologically to do.
And amazingly, out of the blue, I was called. So I became his partner. He decided that I was actually his true partner. He dumped his wife and decided I was the one. And it was like, what? If he was Jesus, I was Mary. And I really believed that. You know, I really believed it because I had no choice to believe it. But I was then by his side. So that, yeah, the sexual abuse did start then.
The sexual abuse that I went through happened on multiple occasions and over several months before this person was actually excommunicated because another child he abused had complained. But I never spoke about it, and I didn't tell my parents about it for a decade because there was also the fear of, you know, if you reported something that happened to you, you were then seen as someone who was lying, you weren't necessarily believed. You know, there was very much a culture of protecting the abusers in the cult.
Sadly, it's not unusual for cults to be involved in sexual abuse, and for those being brought up in it, that's just their reality until they manage to escape, if they manage to escape.
Cult leaders fit the profile of psychopaths. They are charming, seductive, manipulative, they lack empathy, they're highly intelligent.
I was under, obedience to do what I was told, and there was no kindness in that anymore. The horror started at that point because he started really launching into our characters, how bad we were and how we had to really either be close to him or go to hell. That he decided, no, I wasn't Mary at all. I was in fact Lilith. I was the archdemon. Which of course, by then, I again fully believed, and at that point I was suicidal. Because I thought, well, there's nowhere for me, I don't know what to do. But he even warned us against that don't commit suicide. He said, don't even think of it, because you might be in hell here, but you won't get away from me. Even if you die, I'll be there, because I'm God. And that's what stopped me killing myself. Because I was there, with the razor blades in the bathroom. It was, I can't tell you, the hell was just indescribable.
David Berg introduced another doctrine called flirty fishing, which was the belief that women, in particular, should use their bodies in order to win people to Christ. It soon became clear, as with all his other doctrines, that there was another agenda. And, before long, women were being sent out to apparently win souls for Christ, but to encourage those that they were spending time with to donate financially to the cult. This escalated in no time to religious prostitution, where women were being sent out solely to fundraise and offering their bodies in return.
As far as sexual abuse goes, it's usually one extreme or the other. You're either forced to be involved in sex with whoever walks in through the door, or no sex at all. And for those being brought up in it, that's just their reality.
These women genuinely believed that they were doing something for God. I don't think they saw how they were being used. I think the way all cults brainwash their members is pretty much the same.
Techniques of mind control, they're the same techniques are used to radicalize people. They're sometimes called techniques of psychological coercion, and they do break people down psychologically. And Those techniques, for me, are the key to understanding the cult phenomenon.
My name's Mark. I was involved in a Buddhist group, which I now consider to be a cult. There is a hidden dark side to the group. Since that time, I've been trying to warn people. I was a bit sort of a disaffected teenager, really, when I left school. At that time, I'd heard about cults. You know, only somebody who's sort of weak-willed and gullible would ever get involved in a cult. I had been going along to this Buddhist group in North London to learn meditation. The leader sort of took an interest in me. He had been ordained as a Buddhist monk. I quite liked the idea of helping him in his work of, well, what he claimed was his work of helping to bring Buddhism to the West. But he was able to twist that into saying, oh, we need to break through our psychological conditioning, and particularly our conditioning as regards sexual orientation. And I looked upon him as a teacher and tried to follow his teachings, and basically he led me up the garden path. But I didn't know that at the time, or didn't sort of see that. We took advantage of my good nature.
Everyone says that if someone is sick, or is they're a drug addict, or if they've been a victim of a crime, they should be helped. Whereas in this instance, for some reason, because they've joined a so-called faith voluntarily, it's thought that they don't deserve any help.
Not just religion, but any kind of idealist sort of outlook on the world can take advantage of people's naivety and goodwill and twist it for their own ends. I didn't know much about Buddhism, so I wasn't able to separate out the genuine Buddhism from his subtly twisted version of it. He likes sort of manipulating young heterosexual men to try and change their sexual orientation, or at least let him engage in sexual acts with them. So I think it's basically a power thing, personal gratification, I think.
Coercive control legislation that we have now, which only applies within a domestic context, has to apply within groups.
Well, the worst thing from my point of view is he tried to make out that my feelings of love or affection for women were a sort of neurotic projection, which I had to overcome if I was to kind of break through my conditioning and sort of make progress on the Buddhist path. I see myself as very much a victim of misuses of people's goodwill to gain power over them, to get money out of them, and to get sex out of them. And I fell victim to all three.
They shouldn't get out. They should not get out. They should die in jail, because life should mean life. If you take a life, you should die in jail. The perpetrator of the cult, he put his head down and didn't even look at the judge, because he knew what he had done was despicable. He knew the evil that he had done to him.
I think the word cult did enter all of our minds at a very early stage, because what was being described was a single individual who had gathered around him a number of vulnerable people and who was exercising complete control over their lives, deciding where they lived, what they did, even where they ate.
They were compliant because of a leader called Zaid Zaman, who I would call an individual that had Machiavellian traits. That was cunning, he was sinister, he was devious, and he essentially used individuals for his own pleasure and gratification.
So the group with which the case was concerned comprised 5 individuals. The eldest was Kay Rayworth. Her life had taken a downturn in about 2004 when she had divorced, Following that, she'd become involved in internet dating, and it was through that she was to meet the younger man, Zahid Zaman, who was known as Zed. But then we had, of course, Jimmy Prout, Myra Wood, and the fifth member of the group was Anne Corbett.
I don't know what the definition of what a cult is, but these five were very much together, and four of them turned on one of them.
The kind of cultish behaviour that this case revealed often occurs totally under the radar, and so the British public were being exposed for the first time, or probably the first time, to something that was very new to them. And secondly, the public was outraged, I believe, and rightly, by the brutal and barbaric way in which Jimmy had been treated by people that he thought were his friends.
Me and Jimmy met in 1982 in Newcastle. He was on a stall in the town centre, and we just got chatting, and that was it. He was fun-loving, he was funny, he was daft as a brush, he would do anything for anybody. We were together for 14 years, and then after a while he was having an affairs behind me back. We were getting in trouble with the police, and I says, right, just leave, I don't want nothing more to do with you anymore. I did see him around town. The old Jimmy, he was clean, he was tidy, he was always smartly dressed. But then the Jimmy I seen just before the Christmas, he was scruffy. And I'm thinking, well, and I'm thinking, that's not Jimmy. And I says, hello, how are you? And he said, I'm fine. But the person that he was with dragged him away. And that was the last time I had seen him, was 2 weeks before Christmas. And I had never seen him after that. So I didn't know what had happened to him.
Jimmy was a man with vulnerabilities who, by the time that Zahid Zaman met him, was reliant, to some extent at least, upon soup kitchens, and so he was typical prey for Zahid Zaman.
They knew he was vulnerable. They knew he was homeless. I'm thinking, why didn't you just walk away? But as I say, he was too vulnerable, he was too scared.
During the latter stages of 2015, Jimmy posted to Facebook images of injuries to various parts of his body. To his face, to his torso, and in particular to his back, where he had terrible bruising. And in due course we were to discover that he had a series of broken bones, including what must have been an extremely painful fracture to his scapula.
When I seen the photos on his website page, it made me feel very sick. I've never seen anything like that, as though he had been beaten to within an inch of his life. I could tell by how scared he was by his images and the face on him, how scared he really, really was. The police turned up at our door at 10:30 on the Easter Saturday night. And they went, we've come looking for Jimmy. He had been missing since February. And I just thought nothing of it, because Jimmy being Jimmy, he used to do it all the time. And then it was a Sunday when I got that phone call. He died between the 9th and the 10th of February that year.
Well, the police were notified on the 25th of March 2016 as a result of a phone call to the police from Zahid Zaman in relation to the fact that he'd been assaulted by one of his friends, Anne Corbett.
He handed to the police 3 pieces of paper that he said he'd torn from Anne Corbett as she fled the scene, on which pieces of paper were a confession by Anne Corbett to the murder.
Zaman himself, whilst there, was extravagantly upset. He was very upset, he was crying, he was screaming out loud, and this was all recorded on the officer's body-worn video, demonstrating how upset he was at the thought that his good friend James Prout was dead.
Police officers then spoke to others in the house, so a lady called Kay Rayworth, who had been at one stage Zahid Zaman's partner but still lived with him. She filled in some of the details, but again, they were lies. She maintained the story that Anne Corbett was responsible for the death of Jimmy Prout, and another person who had lived with Jimmy Prout, called Myra Wood, who was the partner of Zahid Zaman. She chipped in again to corroborate this false story, as it turned out, that Anne Corbett was solely responsible for the killing of Jimmy Prout.
Corbett was located. Corbett was obviously aware that she'd wrote the note. She agreed I'd wrote the note, but it was as a result of the coercion that Zaman had put her under, and she wrote it at his behest. And when confronted with the police being arrested for murder, it unravelled in relation to what was going on, and she started telling what had happened. Firstly, she was able to tell us where James's body was, which was some 150 yards away from the address, buried in some undergrowth, and had been there for approximately 6 weeks. She also confirmed that they'd even been back to the body to recover a bank card from his pocket so that it could take money out of his bank account. She also confirmed that Jimmy had been abused by all of them and assaulted over a period of time. She also confirmed that she herself had been involved in that and a number of assaults, including some horrific incidents of appalling abuse on Jimmy on the weeks and months leading up to his eventual death, whereby, at Zaman's request, Corbett put some trousers over James's mouth and evidently would have suffocated him.
He invited me into a flat he shared with 2 others at that time. And I thought he was just extending friendship. But obviously, with the benefit of hindsight, he wanted to be available for his own sexual gratification. He used to masturbate himself on my stomach. And that was his thing, really. It went along like that for about 4 years. My parents had both died by that time, so I was able to buy a big country house in the Norfolk countryside for them to run retreats and everything. So I was living there with a number of other of his disciples. And then I told him I didn't want to have sex with him, or didn't want to let him have sex with me, or use me for sex anymore. I eventually found the strength to say, no, go away.
When I look back now on my childhood, for many years I was very angry and bitter about what the cult had done. But I think now when I think back, not only to myself, but to all the other children who were raised in the cult, I just feel an immense sadness because, we weren't allowed to be children. We didn't have childhood. The day I left was a bittersweet day. I had a lot of younger siblings at that point, and I'd been very involved in looking after them. So, leaving them was almost like leaving my own children. I couldn't be 100% certain that my siblings were safe. And yet, I knew that I had to escape because I would be of no good to anyone in the cult. It was a moment of elation because finally I had freedom, where I was finally going to get a chance to think for myself and to do things that I wanted to do and build my own life. Of course, I thought it'd be that simple, but it really wasn't. I went on to realize very quickly that I was just not able to integrate into the world. I had no idea who I was. I had no idea what my personality was. Your entire brain has been programmed by someone else. You have no idea which thoughts are yours and which thoughts have been placed in your head by the cult.
Techniques of mind control are so effective. A lot of people think, if we could just get him or her out of the group, that would be it. It's not as easy as that. You can take someone out of a cult, but getting the cult out of the person is another thing altogether.
Psychologically, that sort of hook of being part of a cult is very difficult to always leave. So even when you do leave and you want to reintegrate, you'll still have that sense of dependency on the cult. And it's very hard to deprogram somebody.
You really need to educate yourself about what has happened to you. Don't stay in the wilderness of thinking you're the worst person in the world, because you're not. You're actually one of the best.
It's lovely. You okay?
Just got me.
We moved into this retreat centre in the Norfolk countryside in 1976, and I eventually broke free in 1986. And it so happens that I had read the novel Jane Eyre, which is sort of about love. That sort of kind of catalysed me into seeing that all this stuff he'd been saying about love is just a neurotic projection and so on was just complete nonsense. It was untrue. And once I saw it was untrue, I began to see that all the rest of his teaching was untrue. I sort of saw through them. They turned against me once I'd started criticising the leader and the group. So they kind of pushed me out, more or less. I owned a sort of majority share of this retreat centre. They eventually persuaded me to sell it to them. It has affected my life a great deal. I don't have a job or a partner or any great role in life other than as an ex-cult member. Because if I hadn't been involved in the cult, I wouldn't have been involved in trying to warn people about cults from going through the same sort of things as I went through.
It was a Sunday when I got that phone call that I had been found dead. I just went white. And I was like crying and speaking about it at the same time. I was as shocked. I thought Jimmy hated fighting. If somebody went towards him to have a go at him, he would run. So I can't understand Jimmy. Why didn't he run? Why didn't he leave? But he was so scared to leave. I just wish I could have heard his voice again to say that I was sorry. I shouldn't have left him.
I'd had experience of gangland cases in which there would commonly be a hierarchy and a senior figure who controlled other persons. But I'd never experienced a situation in which one individual had such a significant, indeed complete degree of control over every aspect of the lives of a number of other people. The level of brutality to which Jimmy Prout was subjected was wholly exceptional. He wasn't just beaten with fists and feet. It wasn't just that weapons were taken to him on a very regular basis, but he was also subject to terrible tortures.
They made him have sex with a dog. They cut one of his testicles out and made him eat it. They took his teeth out with a hammer and chisel. They battered him.
And so the final months of Jimmy's life, from late 2015 to early 2016, were marked by what can only be described as daily tortures, and tortures of the type that perhaps hadn't been seen since the Dark Ages.
These are descriptions of sadism. Individuals were getting pleasure out of inflicting harm on him.
All of us who were involved in the case were affected by what we knew Jimmy had been through. And there were some very clear demonstrations of that. So we had CCTV footage.
They were showing the CCTV cameras, like unkempt. That wasn't the Jimmy I knew. The way he was walking, they were tying him, dragging him, that.
And then we had the final footage of him on the 6th of February 2016. A man barely able to stand, bearded, being dragged down the street. And so we were able to see with our own eyes the deterioration in this man as a result of the way in which he was being treated. And no one could fail to be affected by that.
They are the worst of criminals that you're ever going to meet, and they are capable of the worst behaviour, some of which I've experienced in my experience as a police officer.
So in court, Zahid Zaman remained confident, and I've no doubt that he thought that he could manipulate the process and manipulate the outcome by telling lie after lie. But during the course of cross-examination, his lies, which were absolutely obvious, were exposed very clearly for the jury.
Zahid Zaman and Anne Corbett were found guilty of murder. They both received life imprisonment, and Myra Wood and Kay Rayworth were found guilty of allowing the death of a vulnerable adult.
The day they were sentenced, when we found out when they were sentenced and what sentence they were getting, we all jumped up and told them to rot in jail.
Cult leaders send out recruiters to talk to people, find out what makes them tick, home in on that area of interest and bring them in through the door. The people that say it could never happen to me are usually the easiest people to recruit. Life prior to involvement in the cult was great. I was in a job that I enjoyed. By the time the course had finished, I'd given the group all the money I had, which was $1,550-some in my current account. And I dedicated my life to the group. I went to work the next day and resigned from my job. They hypnotised us 16 times in the 4-day course. The course would go on till 1 or 2 in the morning, so we were becoming sleep deprived, and by the end of the course, you're theirs. Once I'd escaped from the cult, I was quite a mess for the 11 months of withdrawal that I then went through. I wouldn't wish that experience on anybody. Today we equate a lot of the symptoms with post-traumatic stress disorder. I think it still stands on its own though.
It's very difficult when you come out of a cult. You feel like you're just dropping off the edge of the planet. It's the most strange experience. It was organized as a cell structure. We had different names. I was Claire, and I was NB25. Very soon after I formally joined, I was set up in a relationship with someone in the group, a sort of arranged marriage. Little memos would come to you from your contact in these little beige envelopes telling you what to do. And I got a memo one day, as did my husband, saying we should have children. So we did go on to have children as requested, ordered. Decisions about reproduction and your family are taken out of your control. You have no time to reflect on what's going on. So I stayed for another 9 years and eventually got out. When my son was about 5, one of the things that helped me start to be able to regain my sensible thinking was we got one of these memos criticizing how we were raising our son. I just was like, I'm out of here. This group is crazy and I'm out of here.
Cults are not a thing of the past. I think that's a misconception a lot of people have. The issue now is that they are smarter and they have more ways to hide and more ways to operate undetected.
Some cults in the UK might have 50 members. Others will have thousands of members. They will vary a great deal, but it is a huge problem, and people are being recruited every week.
I'm not sure anyone ever truly gets over a cult experience. At least 100 have already committed suicide, of people who were in the cult.
I would like to see us take this on as a public health issue in a very serious way. It's not going away, and it's much more prevalent than we think.
In terms of accountability, it's just not there. I think there should be. Not only to make cults accountable for their activity, but also to protect individuals and families.
If people could understand the real dangers that cults present, groups like ISIS and Al-Qaeda recruit and indoctrinate and manipulate their members in very much the same sort of ways.
I think cult leaders should be prosecuted for these crimes. I think it's a time in society now that society, the police, CPS, the criminal justice system more generally starts to take cults seriously.
These groups are getting away with murder and still are. The only thing apart from governmental action which will help with that is publicity.
It almost feels like these cult leaders and abusers are untouchable. I don't know if there is some fear of authorities being accused of religious persecution. I don't know what it is. What I do know is that nothing's being done.